Everyone in Millbrook County knew Sarah Chen as the farm girl who showed up to school with dirt under her fingernails and the faint smell of hay in her worn flannel shirts. She was the one who sat silently in the back row, her sun-weathered hands folded over second-hand textbooks, never volunteering answers, even when she knew them. Most students at Westfield High dismissed her as just another country kid who'd probably drop out to work full-time on her family's struggling dairy farm. But when the school's most vicious group of bullies decided to make her their latest target, tearing at her clothes in front of half the student body while mocking her for smelling like cow manure, something shifted in those quiet brown eyes. What happened next left everyone in that hallway questioning everything they thought they knew about the silent girl from the Chen farm. Sarah had transferred to Westfield High 2 years ago, but she might as well have been invisible for all the attention she received. She woke every morning at 4:30 to help with milking before school, her calloused hands moving efficiently through tasks that would leave her classmates exhausted. She wore the same 3 pairs of jeans in rotation, all of them softened by countless washes and marked with stubborn grass stains that never quite came out. Her boots were practical, steel-toed things that had seen better days, and she kept her long black hair pulled back in a simple braid that she could tuck under a cap when working the fields. What her classmates didn't know was that Sarah's quietness wasn't shyness or stupidity. It was calculation. Before her family bought the farm in Millbrook, they had lived in Chicago, where Sarah's mother had worked as a private security consultant and her father had been a martial arts instructor. Sarah had been training since she was 5 years old, not in traditional dojos with colored belts and tournaments, but in practical, efficient combat techniques designed for real-world situations. When her father's health declined and they needed a quieter life, they'd invested everything in the farm. Sarah had promised herself she'd leave that part of her life behind, become just another farm kid trying to get through high school. She should have known it wouldn't be that easy. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in late September. The harvest season meant Sarah had been working 18-hour days, helping her father bring in the corn while her mother managed the dairy operation. She'd barely gotten 3 hours of sleep, and it showed in the dark circles under her eyes and the way she moved through the hallways like she was sleepwalking. She was carrying an armload of library books, trying to make it to her locker before first period, when she accidentally bumped into Madison Walsh. Madison was everything Sarah wasn't. Wealthy, perfectly styled, and surrounded by a group of followers who hung on her every word. Her father owned half the commercial real estate in town, and she never let anyone forget it. She wore designer clothes that cost more than Sarah's family made in a month, and she had a particular talent for identifying exactly what would hurt someone most. Behind her stood her usual crew, Jake Morrison, the quarterback who thought his throwing arm made him untouchable, Derek Santos, whose father was the town sheriff, and Brittany Coleman, who documented everything on her phone for her social media followers. "Watch where you're going, barn animal," Madison sneered, even though the collision had been entirely accidental and barely noticeable. She wrinkled her nose theatrically. "God, you reek. Don't they have running water out at that dump you call a farm?" Sarah mumbled an apology and tried to step around them, but Jake moved to block her path. "Where are you rushing off to, farm girl? Got to go slop the pigs?" The group laughed, and other students in the hallway began to stop and watch. "Please, I need to get to class," Sarah said quietly, adjusting her grip on the books. "Please," Brittany mocked in a high-pitched voice. "The little farm girl needs to get to class. What's the point? We all know you're just going to end up pregnant and stuck on that pathetic farm forever, just like your mom." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept her eyes down. She knew better than to react. Reactions only made things worse. But Madison wasn't satisfied with silence. She reached out and grabbed one of Sarah's books, a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird that had belonged to her grandmother. "What's this? Still reading picture books?" Madison opened it and saw the inscription inside, written in Chinese characters. What is this? Some kind of foreign nonsense. She made a move to tear the page. Don't, Sarah said, and for the first time there was steel in her voice. Madison's eyes lit up with malicious delight. She'd finally found a button to push. Or what? You'll sick your cows on me? She handed the book to Jake, who held it above his head, well out of Sarah's reach. Come on, farm girl, jump for it, like the animal you are. Sarah stood perfectly still, calculating. She could reach the book easily, could have Jake on the ground in 2 seconds, Madison in 3, but that would change everything. It would bring attention, questions, problems her family didn't need. So she waited, breathing steadily, while more students gathered to watch the show. That's when Derek decided to escalate things. You know what? I think Farm Girl needs a makeover. He grabbed the collar of Sarah's flannel shirt. This ratty thing has got to go. The sound of tearing fabric echoed through the hallway as Derek yanked hard, ripping the shirt down the back seam. Sarah's books scattered across the floor as she instinctively moved to hold the ruined garment closed. The crowd gasped, some laughing, others recording with their phones. Underneath, she wore a simple white tank top, also worn and mended in places, which only seemed to encourage her tormentors. Look at that! Brittany laughed, zooming in with her camera. She's wearing rags under her rags. This is perfect content. Jake grabbed at the torn flannel, trying to pull it completely off. Come on, let's see what else the farm girl is hiding under there. That's when everything changed. Sarah's hand shot out, faster than anyone could process, gripping Jake's wrist and twisting it at an angle that made him cry out and drop to one knee. In the same fluid motion, she pivoted, using his body as a shield, while her other elbow connected with Derek's solar plexus, dropping him to the ground, gasping for air. The entire sequence took less than 3 seconds. Madison stumbled backward, her eyes wide with shock. You psycho! You can't what? Sarah's voice was different now, controlled and dangerous. She released Jake's wrist and stood straight, no longer bothering to hold her torn shirt closed. Defend myself while you and your friends assault me. While she pointed at Brittany, who was still recording, documents evidence of said assault. The hallway had gone completely silent. Even the teachers, who had been pretending not to notice the bullying, were now paying attention. Mr. Davidson, the history teacher, finally stepped forward. Everyone to class. Now, Sarah, Madison, Jake, Derek, Brittany, principal's office. But Sarah wasn't done. She bent down, calmly collecting her scattered books, including the precious copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. When she stood, she looked directly at Madison. You want to know the difference between us? You think having money makes you powerful, but real power is choosing not to use what you have. Remember that. The principal's office was a disaster. Madison's father arrived within minutes, threatening lawsuits and demanding Sarah be expelled. Sarah sat quietly through it all, her torn shirt covered by a gym hoodie the nurse had given her. She didn't speak until Principal Foster asked for her version of events. Check Brittany's phone, she said simply. She recorded everything. The video was damning. It clearly showed the group initiating contact, Derek tearing her shirt, Jake grabbing at her. Sarah's response, while lightning fast, was clearly defensive. Madison's father left, muttering about talking to his lawyer. The bullies received a 3-day suspension. Sarah received a warning about excessive force. But the real consequences were just beginning. Words spread quickly through the school about what had happened. Videos circulated, despite the administration's attempts to contain them. Sarah had hoped things would go back to normal, but instead she found herself the center of unwanted attention. People wanted to know where she'd learned to fight like that. Others, emboldened by her stand, began sharing their own stories about Madison's crew. 3 days later, when the suspended students returned, Sarah noticed them watching her differently. There was fear there now, but also something else, resentment. planning. She'd humiliated them publicly, and people like Madison Walsh didn't forget that kind of slight. The retaliation started small. Sarah would find her truck tires deflated after school, forcing her to change them in the parking lot while missing valuable work time at the farm. Dead animals, clearly roadkill but positioned deliberately, appeared in her locker. Someone spread rumors that her family's farm was about to be foreclosed on, that they were illegal immigrants, that her mother had been a prostitute in China. Sarah weathered it all with the same quiet determination she brought to every pre-dawn milking. But Madison wasn't satisfied with petty harassment. She wanted complete destruction. She started digging into Sarah's family history, using her father's connections to access records that should have been private. That's when she found something interesting. Sarah's parents had changed their last name when they moved to Millbrook. They weren't really the Chens, they were the Jiangs, and Mr. Jiang had been involved in something before coming to the farm, something that had required them to disappear. Madison didn't know what she'd stumbled onto, but she knew it was leverage. She confronted Sarah after school on a Friday in the empty ag science classroom where Sarah often studied. "I know your secret," Madison said, brandishing a folder of documents. "Your family's hiding something big. And unless you want everyone to know, unless you want immigration or the FBI or whoever showing up at your precious farm, you're going to apologize, publicly, on your knees, in front of the whole school." Sarah looked at the documents, her face paling as she recognized what Madison had found. Her father's work with a joint task force investigating human trafficking rings, the price on his head from the criminals he'd helped convict, the witness protection program that had failed to protect them, forcing them to create new identities on their own. "You don't understand what you're playing with," Sarah said quietly. "I understand enough," Madison smirked. "Monday morning assembly. You apologize for attacking us, admit you're just jealous trash, and beg for forgiveness, or I post everything online." Sarah's mind raced. If Madison exposed their location, the people looking for her father would find them. Her family would have to run again, lose the farm, lose everything they'd built. But if she gave in to Madison's demands, she'd be sacrificing something else, something just as valuable. "I need time to think," Sarah said. "You have the weekend," Madison replied, leaving the folder on the desk. "Don't test me." That night, Sarah sat with her parents at their small kitchen table and told them everything. Her mother's face was grave, her father's hands clenched into fists. They'd tried so hard to give her a normal life, and now it was all unraveling. "We can run again," her mother said in Mandarin. "Start over somewhere else." "No," Sarah replied. "I'm tired of running. And we love this farm. This is our home." Her father studied her for a long moment. "Then we fight, but not with fists this time, with truth." Over the weekend, Sarah and her parents made a decision. They contacted her father's old handler at the FBI, explained the situation. Turns out, several of the people her father had testified against had been recently apprehended, and the threat level had decreased significantly. They could come out of hiding, reclaim their real names. It would mean questions, attention, everything they'd tried to avoid, but it would also mean freedom from the fear that had haunted them for years. Monday morning came too quickly. The entire school was buzzing with rumors about what would happen at assembly. Madison had made sure everyone knew to expect a show. Sarah arrived early, wearing new clothes her mother had bought for her in town, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of in its usual practical braid. She looked different, confident, dangerous. The assembly began with the usual announcements, but everyone was waiting for the main event. Madison kept shooting looks at Sarah, waiting for her to stand up and humiliate herself. But Sarah remained seated, calm and still. Finally, Madison couldn't wait any longer. She stood up and loudly said, "I think Sarah Chen has something she'd like to say to the school." Principal Foster tried to intervene, but Sarah was already standing. She walked to the front of the gym, took the microphone and began to speak. My name is Sarah Zhang, not Chen. 2 years ago, my family came to Millbrook to hide from criminals who wanted to kill my father for testifying against their human trafficking ring. We changed our names, kept our heads down, and tried to build a new life here. The gym was dead silent. Madison's face had gone white. Last week, I was assaulted in the hallway by students who thought I was an easy target because I'm quiet and work on a farm. When I defended myself, they decided to dig into my family's past and tried to blackmail me with information that could have put my family in danger. So I'm standing here now, telling you all the truth, because I'm done being afraid. I'm done hiding. She turned to look directly at Madison. You wanted power over me. You wanted me on my knees. But real strength isn't about making others kneel. It's about standing up, even when you're afraid, even when it costs you everything. The gym erupted. Teachers were trying to restore order, students were talking all at once, and Madison was frantically trying to explain to her friends that she didn't know, she hadn't meant for this to happen. But Sarah wasn't finished. I trained in combat sports from the time I was 5, she continued. Not because I wanted to hurt people, but because my parents knew that someday I might need to protect myself or others. Every morning, I wake up at 4:30 to help my family run a farm that feeds this community. I'm not ashamed of the dirt under my fingernails or the calluses on my hands. They're proof that I know how to work, how to build something real. She set down the microphone and walked back to her seat. The assembly dissolved into chaos, but Sarah sat calmly through it all. She'd thrown away her invisibility, her carefully maintained anonymity, but she'd gained something more valuable, the freedom to be herself. The aftermath was swift and dramatic. The FBI did show up, but not for the reasons Madison had threatened. They came to ensure the Zhang family's safety and to investigate whether Madison's father had illegally accessed federal witness protection records. Madison was expelled for blackmail and endangerment. Her father's business dealings came under scrutiny, revealing a pattern of corruption that had nothing to do with Sarah, but everything to do with his own choices. Jake, Derek, and Brittany faced their own consequences. The video of the assault had gone viral, and college scouts who had been interested in Jake suddenly weren't returning calls. Derek's father, the sheriff, faced questions about why his son thought he was above the law. Brittany lost most of her followers when people realized she'd been documenting and enabling bullying for content. But the most surprising change came from unexpected quarters. Other students, inspired by Sarah's courage, began standing up to their own bullies. The quiet kids, the ones who worked after school jobs, the ones who didn't wear the right clothes or drive the right cars, they all suddenly seemed a little less afraid. Sarah found herself with something she'd never expected. Friends, real ones, who didn't care about her past or her fighting skills, who just saw her as the girl who'd stood up when it mattered. She joined the agricultural club officially, started tutoring students in self-defense after school, and even went to prom in a dress she and her mother made together, combining traditional Chinese embroidery with modern design. The farm thrived too. Once the community learned about the Zhang family's story, business picked up. People wanted to support the family that had sacrificed so much to do the right thing. The local newspaper did a feature on their sustainable farming practices, and suddenly they had more customers than they could handle. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the same hallway where everything had started. The lockers had been repainted, security cameras installed, and new anti-bullying policies implemented. She was heading to her advanced placement chemistry class, no longer invisible, but no longer hiding either. As she walked, she passed a freshman girl being cornered by some sophomores who were mocking her second-hand clothes. Sarah didn't hesitate. She walked over, stood beside the girl, and simply said, "Is there a problem here?" The sophomores took one look at her and scattered. The freshman looked up at her with awe. "Thank you. You're Sarah Zhang, aren't you?" The one who, I'm just someone who knows what it's like to be different, Sarah interrupted gently. And who learned that different doesn't mean less than. Come on, I'll walk you to class. As they walked together, Sarah reflected on how much had changed. She'd come to Millbrook trying to disappear, to be nobody special. Instead, she'd learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop hiding and stand in your truth, even when your shirt is torn and your secrets are spilling out for everyone to see. The farm girl who'd shown up to school with dirt under her fingernails was still there, but now everyone knew that those hands, weathered by honest work and trained for protection, were capable of so much more than anyone had imagined. And Sarah Zhang was perfectly fine with that.